Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest event in our What It Takes series. This is the first one of 2022, and today we're going to look with our expert panel at what it takes to reduce your carbon footprint. My name is Richard Murphy. I work in the university's Centre for Environment and Sustainability. I'm a professor of life cycle assessment and a past director of CES. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome two alumni from CES to this event, Amy Fetzer and Emma Keller. CES is in its 30th anniversary year at the moment. We were one of the very first multidisciplinary centres to be founded in the UK to look into sustainability and environmental strategy, as some of you will know. So it's a great pleasure to welcome all participants to this event on a beautiful sunny afternoon here in Guildford. I hope you have fond memories of your time at CES. Next week, for example, we're teaching our master's students on the intensive module on life cycle assessment, and we're very much looking forward to that. We've got a very healthy MSc course at the moment. And by the way, that module is also available as CPD for those of you in professional work at the moment, but perhaps enough of the commercial. We'd very much look forward to introducing our speakers. As audience, we would be delighted to receive questions from you in the Q&A part of this webcast. The format for today is we're going to go round the panel. They've been given the challenge, and it is a challenge, of only 3 minutes each in order to give their perspective on something about themselves and their perspective on what it takes to reduce your carbon footprint. After that, the floor will be open for questions. So please send a question in at any point, and we'll endeavour to pick up as many of these as possible and share them out to the panel so we can have some discussion and debate about the items raised. The event is running on the eve of Earth Hour today, and it's that last Saturday in March when people around the globe show their support for our planet and to raise awareness about sustainability. So it's falling at a very apposite time. So I think without further ado, I would like to introduce Professor Matt Leach. Many of you will know Matt. He can't be with us today, but he's very kindly provided us with a pre-recorded talk on how countries around the world are transforming to low carbon energy alternatives.
Hi everyone, I'm sorry not to be able to join live, but I offer this short overview of an urgent global challenge that the university is contributing to. One of the UN's 17 development goals, which are aiming to transform our world, is SDG 7, seeking to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all by 2030. The current situation for electricity access looks like this. Almost 1 billion people don't share our Western or Northern experience of the convenience of electricity. And parts of Africa in particular have less than 50% of people having any use of electricity at all. Progress on this, though, is steady with multiple approaches, including extending traditional power grids, which is the gold standard, but it's very expensive and slow. Complementary strategies include supply of small standalone solar lights, individual solar home systems that can power a few lights plus perhaps a radio and a mobile phone, and larger village level mini grids that can also power community facilities, often including a pub. A more intractable problem, though, is access to clean cooking. Almost 3 billion people are currently using some form of solid biomass to cook, with Africa again at the centre, but wider spread issues including in much of Asia. Now, why do we care about this? Well, biomass cooking brings a host of problems. Probably the most pressing is that 4 billion people a year die prematurely due to indoor air pollution caused by cooking. Clean cooking has been a focus of research and aid investment for years, but primarily on designing and rolling out improved or more efficient biomass cook stoves. But health research has shown that there is really no safe level of indoor pollution. Many countries have shifted toward bottle gas, but this is a propane-butane mix, which is a fossil fuel with its climate change impacts, and it's also expensive to import. Our research is focused in changing the narrative towards truly modern energy for cooking, and it focuses on routes either to make a bottle gas using waste materials, either municipal solid waste or agricultural residues that we would term a bio-LPG, or electric cooking. In terms of electric cooking, the trick has been shown to be to use highly efficient devices, as well as ones that can cook a wide range of a household's typical diet. The electric pressure cooker or multi-cooker is just the ticket. It can be used where the grid is available, or it can be powered from solar PV via batteries. It's relatively expensive to buy, but it's very cheap to run. And our work has been focused really on exploring the relative costs of different cooking fuels and devices, and showing the benefits of efficiency and of the EPC in particular. The challenge then is how poor families can afford the upfront costs, no matter how cheap the device is over its whole life cycle. While smart business models have emerged, providing devices for free and spreading costs over use, including using inbuilt Internet of Things devices to monitor use and to charge accordingly. Clean cooking and energy access are fundamental challenges for the world to achieve a just transition to a low carbon future, leaving no one behind. Do get in touch if you'd like to know any more.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Matt. And I know he would have wanted to be with us today. So please, those of you on this webcast, please do feel free to contact Matt Leach. You can find his email details readily at CES's website at the University of Surrey. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Chris Jones. Chris is a colleague and friend. We both are university research theme champions, me for sustainability, but Chris particularly for our urban living. And Chris also is the leader and initiator of a very exciting, just forgotten the name of it, Chris.
Living Lab Initiative.
Living Lab, sorry. Yeah, despite I've been involved in it. Anyway, Chris, over to you.
Okay, thanks for that introduction, Richard. So I'm Chris Jones, and I'm a social and environmental psychologist here at Surrey. I'm also, as Richard mentioned, the lead of the university's Living Lab Initiative, which I'll talk about momentarily, and I'm the urban living research team lead for the university. And I'm going to be telling you today what it takes to reduce our carbon footprint, looking at the value of collaborative research and innovation, particularly academics working with non-academic partners. So 3 minutes is not long. Let's see where we can get to in 3 minutes. Why should academics be thinking about collaborating with non-academics? Well, I put down 3 things we might want to consider. First, the quality of our research. This can be improved by engaging with the beneficiaries of our work. So if we're working hand in glove with the people who stand to use the outputs of our research endeavours and our innovation, then that can actually improve the quality of the work that we're doing. And it can mean that we are answering questions that society has. We can maximise knowledge exchange and impact opportunity as well. We can shorten the timescales between the generation of new knowledge and the application of that knowledge for societal benefit. And of course, we're all beginning to care a bit more about knowledge exchange and impact when we're thinking about the REF exercises. And there can be personal benefits as well. So generating knowledge exchange and impact opportunities can not only provide you with more research income opportunity, but is going to be increasingly important in terms of your career progression when it comes to your annual appraisals. So there are reasons why academics should be thinking about this. Why should non-academics be getting involved with academics? Well, there are obvious reasons around accessing academic expertise, the facilities, the resources, the students that we have, students for participants and what have you. There can be reputational benefits as well. Universities provide independent academic stamps of approval for the research and innovation which is being conducted by non-academics or in collaboration with academics. Although, of course, the stamp of approval is not guaranteed because we are independent. And if we find things that are wrong, we will have to tell you about those. But there can also be financial benefits as well for non-academics. There can be increased opportunities to access and chances of winning financial funding from a number of different kinds of bodies, including places like Innovate UK. So it pays to be aware of what mechanisms exist within the university in order to foster such collaboration. I'd like to draw your attention to our research and innovation strategy web pages. I can circulate these slides afterwards so you can access those. This provides a lot of information about the different mechanisms by which you can get involved in collaborative research and innovation. One of the ways in which you can begin to collaborate with the university is via the university's Living Lab Initiative, which Richard mentioned. So this is an approach to research and innovation which connects academics and non-academics in order to apply and research and innovation being conducted at the university or with its partners to solve real world issues. And importantly, you're utilizing an area which is under your control. So we're talking here about the university's campus, communities, and those in the surrounding communities in Guildford and what have you. There are a number of different examples of these kinds of living lab projects ongoing. I've got two that bear relation to my own research interests. The first is the My Global Home Demonstrator project. This is a big scale project where we're working with a small company which is developing a modular smart home technology. And the university is working in collaboration in order to do some pre and post occupancy analysis of both the physical and social success of these modular smart homes. And a second example is a project which is coming down the pipeline very soon, pun intended. This is working with the Surrey County Council in order to better understand why people don't make use of home improvement schemes, which would hopefully improve their energy efficiency and reduce their carbon footprint. So to summarize, because I'm already over 3 minutes, collaboration is good, it's important, but to do it effectively, you need to identify mutual benefits between the various partners, and you need to work swiftly and early in order to make sure that these partnerships can develop over time. And you need to keep active and open lines of communication. Things can get sort of bogged down in the system. Making sure that you're on top of the communication and pushing things along is important. I'll leave things there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris, and pretty good on the 3 minutes, actually. So thanks for that. It's a great pleasure to hand over next to Ian Christie. Ian's an expert in social sciences and sustainable development. He, as I know many of our alumni will know, is an absolute font of knowledge. He has a network to die for. And so, Ian, over to you. And he's a very deep thinker in this space. So, Ian.
I think you're setting that to fail there, Richard, but it's great to be here. Thank you very much for the chance to join in. And I'm going to be trying to cover in 3 minutes issues about the ethics of sustainable development and environment relating to climate change. And I'll make these 3 points in 3 minutes. First of all, one of the things that it takes to cut our carbon footprint is an ethical commitment, and that I think is at individual and at group level. The second point is that the slightest acquaintance that we have with all of the evidence, all the data on the impacts of climate disruption tells us that it's a matter of fairness and justice. And I'll illustrate that briefly with a couple of slides, which have got a lot of detail in them, which I can't go into, but everyone can have these slides afterwards. And the third point there is that it's ethically demanding for us in the rich world, for reasons that will be obvious, to make the cuts required. So loading it all on ourselves as individuals is a bad idea, and we need to act as far as we can in concert with others. And there's a link there with what Chris has just been talking about. So why is it a matter of ethical commitment? Well, rather than quote a moral philosopher, I've picked up Boris Johnson here speaking at the COP26 conference in Glasgow last November, and he made a very striking remark. We're coming centre stage before a vast and uncountable audience of posterity. If we fail, they will not forgive us. They will judge us with bitterness and with a resentment that eclipses any of the climate activists of today, and they will be right. And I think that's correct. And what he's doing there is evoking the idea that we should be ashamed and feel guilty at the prospect of inflicting climate disruption on future generations, indeed on present generations of poor and vulnerable people, when we have the power and the knowledge and the resources to do differently. We can't claim that we're ignorant. So we're in the position of knowingly inflicting harms which we could avoid. And if we carry on doing that, we should feel guilty and ashamed, and we will be judged accordingly by posterity. That's what Boris Johnson is saying. And I think he's correct about that. So there's a moral imperative behind climate action. Now, I said that the slightest glance at the data tells us it's a matter of fairness and justice. So here are a couple of slides from the Lancet Planetary Health Journal. So if you look at the top, you can see the countries which have overshot their emissions so far beyond any safe level. And you can see that it's concentrated in the industrial rich north, especially in the most affluent countries, including the UK. If you look down at the bottom, you can see the countries which are going to be most vulnerable, first and worst, and the least equipped to deal with climate disruption based on the emissions which have been historically generated from the rich north, although China has already caught us up. So you can see there that there's a complete mismatch between responsibility and impact. So the people who've done least to cause the problem will be the ones suffering first and worst. So there's an obvious issue there of injustice, which we can't ignore. There's also another issue of inequality, which is to do with responsibility for emissions. So the richest 1% are responsible for 15% of emissions related to consumption. And in the next 9%, we've got a large proportion of responsibility, and that includes me and probably many of us in the audience. So there's an immediate issue there about who's responsible for taking on most of the burden of reducing emissions. Now, this is a complex chart. The key thing to look at is the black line at the bottom, and that shows us the carbon emissions per capita compatible with a 1.5 degree C warming, which we think is the limit of tolerable warming. And you can see there that the poorest people, many of the people that Matt was talking about in his presentation, have already done their bit. They're actually below that black line. And people like me in the richest 10% are a long way above it. And people in the richest 1% are an awful long way above it. So the burden of responsibility for reducing emissions falls on the rich and affluent. We've got many reasons to care about that. It's obviously a very demanding thing to do, but we've got good reasons to care. And there are some of them. It's pretty difficult to look your children and grandchildren in the eye and say, this was all too much trouble. And it's pretty hard to look at the kind of people that Matt is talking about and saying, we couldn't really get ourselves organized to do this, even though we had the resources to make a big difference. And we might also look at our concern for care for the natural world, which is also going to be massively damaged by uncontrolled climate disruption. Now, that's all very demanding to do. And although many very committed individuals get a long way with taking action in their own right without thinking about what others are doing, most of us need safety in numbers. We need to feel that people like us are committed in the same kind of cause, and that gives us confidence and persistence. So joining communities of virtuous practice, neighborhood groups, churches, university societies and clubs and so on, volunteering projects, or the new program called The Jump, recently launched in Guildford at the Zero Hub, these are all things which can reinforce us in our ethical commitment. But we can't get away from it. And I just want to close with this quotation from the philosopher Elizabeth Cripps in her new book on climate justice. It's not an esoteric goal. It's about living in a way that doesn't kill people, doesn't drown them, burn their homes, or give them malaria. And however much we should do to avert this tragedy, it's more than most of us do now in the rich world. So it's demanding, but it's crucial that we do it. And the more we do it in concert with others, the easier it will be. Thanks very much.
Super. Thanks very much, Ian. And I'm sure some of you will have noticed we benefited from Ian's photographic skills around the campus as well. So thanks as ever for those, Ian. They bring a nice brightness to a lot of us. Pleasure to hand over now to Tom Parrott. And Tom is Head of Energy and Sustainability at the university. He tells me he hasn't been with us that long, but he's accomplished an absolutely astonishing amount for the University of Surrey in the time that he's been with us. And Tom, it's a pleasure to hand over to you and say something about the university's campus and its sustainability journey. Tom.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for having me here today. It really doesn't seem that long to me either. I'll do what I can in the 3 minutes I've got to talk about the university's approach to reducing its carbon footprint. And I really want to zoom in on one area of renewable energy and some exciting projects that we've got coming up in that space. When it comes to reducing your carbon footprint, though, I think one of the most important things for me is integrity. People are very wise to greenwashing these days. And for us to be able to communicate our research strengths in sustainability as an organization, to be able to launch exciting new projects like the Institute for Sustainability, we really need a strong foundation of addressing our own operational performance, addressing our carbon emissions across our campuses. And the reason we think that we actually need to fast forward and achieve a net zero position by 2030 is actually hidden in the detail of some of the Climate Change Commission's advice to the UK government, in that a net zero target that's proposed and accepted for the UK at the moment would, as we know, respond to the latest science and meet our obligations under the Paris Commitment. But if actually each country across the world replicates the UK's 2050 commitment, it would deliver laudably, perhaps, a greater than 50% chance of limiting temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. But do we really believe that simply having a greater than 50% chance of limiting temperature increase to 1.5 degrees is enough, given some of the catastrophic effects that we see beyond that level? A 2050 target also gives us the impression that we can wait until perhaps 2040 or 2035 plus in order to address these issues and keep kicking the can down the road, when really the hardest and fastest action we need to take is within the current decade that we sit within. So the university was one of the first universities in the UK to announce a net zero target at the beginning of January 2020. We linked that as well to a science-based approach that I'll talk about in a second. And what that commits us to do is for our direct emissions to reduce our carbon emissions by 46% over the next 10 years. And then we will purchase offsets in 2030 to cover that, but we will continue thereafter to reduce our carbon emissions, to reduce the amount of offsetting that we do, and to reach an absolute zero position by 2042 or sooner if possible as new technologies come along. And I think some of the partnerships that I'm going to talk about give us a mechanism for actually delivering that far sooner. There are 4 steps to our approach. We need to reduce the demand. So many of these are completely relevant to people in their own homes across the UK and across the world at present. We need to reduce our demand for energy by improving the insulation of our buildings, by installing energy efficient measures, by changing our behaviours. We need to drive up the amount of renewable energy that we generate on our campus. And we've got a target to get from 0.1% as we are today to 20% of our energy generated from renewables on our campus. And that's half. That piece we need to do on on-site renewables represents half of the carbon reduction that we'll make over the next 10 years. And then we have a piece about purchasing and where we purchase our energy from. And that needs to come from certified, certificated renewable energy schemes only. And then we get to this point in offsetting. And that's all about transparency and certification and keeping an eye on these projects. And hopefully we can invest in projects within Surrey that have sort of linked social benefits and economic benefits. Our target follows the principles of being science-based. So there's a recognized methodology, science-based targets initiative methodology. Whilst we can't, as a university, have our target verified by that standard at present, we have used that to establish our fair share of carbon reduction we need to make each year if we're going to limit a temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. And we call that doing our fair share. Whilst we're very much focused on our scope 1 and 2 emissions, the electricity we use on site, the gas that we burn for heating on our site, what we use in our own vehicles, we also have a keen eye on our supplier-based emissions. And we're really focusing at the moment on delivering a baseline that we have confidence in, establishing relationships with our suppliers, working on risks, providing EV charging for our staff and students, which is a project that we are going to be rolling out over the next year. And we believe in all of this, that transparency is absolutely key. We need to be reporting on an annual basis on our progress, whether it's good or bad. And so you'll see this year the university launch its first Sustainable Development Goals report, combining both our social impact and our environmental performance in one-stop shop for all external audiences and internal audiences. So to finish on one exciting project then, as I say, we're going to dramatically increase the renewable energy that we generate on our campus. That is going to be borne out through a significant partnership with SSE Energy Solutions, where we are going to install far more solar across our campuses. And we have plans that will be going to planning this year for approval. That project is already in train. We're going to be replacing our centrally heated gas systems on the Stag Hill campus with new electrified systems incorporating air source to provide heat to 22 buildings on our Stag Hill campus. And those projects combined are going to deliver a near 6,000 ton decrease in our carbon emissions each year. And that's the equivalent of nearly 1,200 UK homes emissions every single year that we're going to be taking off. There is also a significant research partnership with SSE Energy Solutions. So by working with them, and we've been working on this for 2 years, we're also going to be creating opportunities for living lab research, as Chris has already mentioned. We're going to be looking at joint grant bids in the area of mutual research interest. We're going to be establishing new studentships. So this is a significant partnership. It's an innovative partnership, and innovation is what we need if we are going to reduce our carbon footprint and really sort of do this at pace. So pleased to sort of share a little bit about that today, and just one element of the university's plans. But you can find more on our external website. You can email us directly at sustainability@surrey.ac.uk, or you can go on our Instagram account for an update week by week on the projects we're working on, and that's Surrey Sustainability. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom. And it's truly been a very exciting time. These last 12 months, I think we've seen big changes, and actually even going back further as well. It's a journey, isn't it? This isn't something that we get to a point and then stop. I think everybody on campus is very energized about this now. So thanks for you and your team's effort on all of this. It's been fabulous. Great pleasure now to hand over to Amy Fetzer. Amy graduated in 2015 with a distinction in Masters in Sustainable Development. She's now an active author, journalist, and consultant. And together with her friend and colleague, Sherry Aarons, wrote the book, Climb the Green Ladder, which I have a copy of, Amy. So it's a very good read. I can assure the audience for that. So we look forward very much to hearing from you. Great to have you back.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to take part today. It's a real pleasure to be back kind of in the Surrey remotely, but back in the Surrey atmosphere. It was such an exciting time for me to do the Masters, because it enabled me to shift my career from working as a sort of lifestyle travel health journalist to working exclusively in sustainability, and without my Masters that wouldn't have happened, so I'm eternally grateful for that. And as you mentioned, I got a bit distracted. I took a bit longer than I should to finish my Masters because I got distracted and wrote my book instead of my dissertation, which then became my dissertation. And I was very lucky to have the support of the wonderful Ian Christie, among others, to help me and inspire me along that journey. And so since I started at Surrey, I realised that I felt that, which again I think is very appropriate for this talk about how we can all make a difference. I felt that that if we could all, and this was the driver of the book, that if we all could use our power, it was really important all those choices we make in our personal life, but if we could apply that in a business context, we could really, really maximise our impact. So that was what the book was about, is kind of trying to give people the tools and the skills and the excitement that they could make a really big impact. But my work has shifted, so I didn't do very much standard journalism. I do tons of research, thought leadership pieces, lots of support with ESG reports, and really trying to help companies tackle issues when they got an issue with food waste or plastics, or wanting to encourage their contract caterers, wanting to encourage people to eat healthier diets. So I get very excited about going off and helping people to look into that, and I work with lots of different organisations to do that, including RAP and Footprint and EY and everything. So it's been a really, having that sustainability background and knowledge and access to so many inspiring lecturers was a really beneficial thing for me personally and professionally. When it comes to what we can all do to make a difference, I think a lot of it's been touched on already, but I personally feel that the choices we make in our personal life, trying to eat more plant-based, trying to, be very mindful of our consumption and reduce it where we can, and upcycling and reusing and all those amazing ways you can do that. But I definitely do think that the biggest power we can all have is by taking those values to work and really looking at the way that the organisation you're working within is operating. How can we look at those three strands of sustainability, the resources, the environment, the people, and be always looking at, doing things in a way that supports the SDGs, supports the Paris Accord, and, absolutely doesn't have waste. So, yeah, that's my thoughts.
Splendid. Thanks, Amy. And I must say, I think even just in delivery of some of the work CES does and my other academic colleagues on campus, we've learned a lot over the last 2 years of working in the COVID time and things like that, and looking at ways of delivering a lot of what we do through hopefully lower footprint means. So thanks. And our final panelist today is Emma Keller. Emma, it's great to have you back. Dr. Emma Keller graduated in 2016 with an ND in sustainability for engineering and energy systems, the CESE ND. Really CES's third ND program, absolutely superb. Emma was working with Unilever, I believe, at that point in the ND. Since then, Emma's moved on, worked for WWF as their head of their food team lead. And certainly we interacted when you were with WWF, not so far away here, WWF UK. And a major project came in with Tesco to look at halving the environmental footprint of the UK average shopping basket. So Emma is now with Nestle in the sustainability team. So over to you, Emma.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. And thank you to Matt, James, Ian and Tom for those presentations. Absolutely fantastic to see the work you're doing, both to get your own house in order on sustainability at the university site, but also the amazing research being done to support some of those bigger systemic issues that we're all facing into. So it's really great to be back, seeing some familiar faces. And I think you can hear throughout my career, I've basically become obsessed with food, eating it, but also looking at the food system as one of the major kind of contributors to climate change. Around 25% of all emissions are from the food system, but actually it's a unique system that can really be part of the solution to climate change, really storing emissions and driving change. So that's really where my career has been, and Surrey gave me a fantastic start in that sector, being exposed to all the wonderful academics and research and people. So massive thank you to Surrey and team. So yeah, my job now is head of sustainability at Nestle. For those who aren't super familiar with Nestle, we're probably the world's largest food and beverage company in around 186 countries globally. We're actually present in nearly 97% of UK households, with over 2,000 brands that we have globally, from some of our coffee brands like Nescafe and Nespresso, to some household favourite confectionery brands, Kit Kat, Quality Street, through to some of our more innovative brands like Wonder, which is one of our plant-based milks, or Garden Gourmet, some of our new plant-based meat alternatives. And I think really taps into what Amy says, that we recognise consumers are changing, trends are changing. It's up for us as businesses to meet those needs, but also up for us as businesses to really challenge the status quo and look at what the future demands, which was really inspired by the opening video you shared. Absolutely great to be here. My role at Nestle is really about meeting our ambitious commitment to get towards net zero. We've set a global goal to do that by 2050 at the very latest, but absolutely we'll be looking to pull forward as much as possible. And I think one of the things that's really stood out already from today, and I'm sure we'll get into it when we have the discussion, is a quote from Einstein that really rings true, is we can't solve today's problems using the thinking we used when we created them. And that's really because we've got to, as individuals, what we can do is be the ethical and the moral conscious inside a business, to challenge the status quo, to ask those questions, building on some of Ian's points around this is an ethical challenge. We've got to put people at the heart of what we're talking about and what we're doing to drive change. And I think that's a role we all have, is to not be scared to make those points, to ask those difficult questions to go forward. So I'll leave it there and look forward to get into the panel discussion.
Okay, super. Thanks very much, Emma. And indeed, I'd like to say a quick thank you to all of the panelists. It's a big challenge getting this over in 3 minutes. I think we've got some outstanding pointers, and we've had some nice questions coming in on the Q&A. And so a very clear link actually to a couple of these questions is the matter of food and diet. And so can I throw this one open? Here's paraphrasing this slightly. When talking about personal change, should we not put our emphasis on reducing or cutting our consumption of animal products? So quite a specific question. Would anyone in the panel like to pick this one up to start us? If not, I'll distribute it. Oh, good on you, Amy. Over to you.
Hi. Well, Emma will know even more, I'm sure, on this, but I work quite a lot with the hospitality and food service sector on a whole raft of sustainability issues, but a lot on food waste as well. And I think I'm actually just currently about to finalise a report on meat waste, but I mean, it's well established that meat is disproportionately impactful from a carbon, land use, water, every sort of metric. So reducing, shifting as a society to a more plant-based diet is an absolute must to ensure that we meet our carbon reduction goals. Now, of course, that most of the advice is not saying that we have to, cut meat out entirely. It's just we need to shift, and we need to shift to better farming systems, and a really big component of that is tackling the waste, all food waste, but in particular waste in the meat supply chain. And what's really interesting is that if food waste, that's all food waste, not just meat. If food waste was a country, it would be the third largest emitter after the US and China. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is really helpful to people is to make sure they are doing everything that they can with the food that they have to make sure not one scrap of that is wasted and that nothing goes in the bin. Because all that impact, all that embodied carbon, water, fertilizers, inputs is for nothing. And definitely looking at all the ways to shift towards increasing the plants within your diet as much as you feel is possible. So looking at, using perhaps some plant-based alternatives, or just bulking up meals, changing the composition. If you're making a bolognese, can you make that 3/4 plants and only have a little bit of mince to give you that texture and flavor that you're looking for? So there's lots of really, really brilliant things that can be done. And then you have the people like the Nestle's and the Corns who are looking at creating really good quality meat alternatives that are also still low carbon and low sugar, salt. There's not all alternatives are equal. There is a big issue around some of these products because they are heavily processed, and because of getting that flavor. Some of the things that are being put in them are maybe not things we want to be putting a lot of in our bodies. So you do need to choose carefully. But I would I'm sure I'll hand over to Emma now. But I would definitely say that reducing meat where and when you can, and choosing better, more ethically sourced meat wherever you can is a real priority.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Amy. Yeah, and I'm not surprised to hear that. I mean, it's a very interesting and important debate, I think. Food waste, clearly, but also things like ultra-processed food and so on. Indeed, we do a fair bit of work with local farmers around here and Surrey Hills area and so on. And there you're looking at sort of balancing maybe a mixed arable and animal husbandry as well, with soil carbon management of that, and getting the balance right, I think, is absolutely critical. Excellent point on that. Emma, over to you. I'm sure you'd like to.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. I mean, the beauty of changing our diet and looking at how we reduce meat is it's something we can all do every single day, 3 times a day. So it's just about making those more conscious choices each day. There's some amazing research out there from a group at Oxford who've shown that even the best performing animal agriculture systems, whether that's meat or dairy, are 10-fold higher in impact, not just carbon, but water, biodiversity loss, etc., than even the worst performing plant-based systems. So a 10-fold impact difference between the best performing meat and the worst performing plant systems. So it's clear that there's a major opportunity for us to do that. The other thing, of course, is diversity. We have such a narrow diet. There are over 3,000 edible plant species in the world, and we eat 12 of them. And actually 5 of those plant species make up around 75% of our diet: corn, wheat, soy, etc. So it's really up to us as businesses and others to try and diversify our diet and look for alternatives. But I think while we're on the kind of what can we do personally, diet, absolutely key. We all know that. Travel, look at how we look at our travel options. But the single biggest thing we can all do, which is 21 times more powerful than going veggie, than giving up flying and switching your energy provider, is to green your pension, is to look at what our money is doing in our pension behind the scenes, and make sure it's being invested ethically. The nightmare for anyone working in sustainability is that while we're all trying to fight the good fight and drive change, is that our pensions sitting behind us are doing the opposite. So there's a really fantastic campaign I'd encourage you all to look at called Make My Money Matter, which can help you have agency over what your pension's been invested in, and it can drive a massive impact for us and for those future societies we're trying to take care of.
Super. Thanks, Emma. If I'd like to come back to that, I think, in a moment, certainly because we've got one or two very interesting questions coming in that I think pick up on that. I would like to go on the waste issue as well, because waste is certainly seen as one of the things that we can actually all do something about, both individually and institutionally. So here's a question. Maybe Tom, I'll pass it to you first, but I'm sure Chris and perhaps Ian, you'll have a thing on this as well. So here's the question. Can I ask how far along the journey to being a zero waste university the University of Surrey has progressed? For instance, is there now a warehouse on campus where new students can pick up furniture and white goods left behind from departing students, et cetera, et cetera? So nice question, and over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I think Nick, I think it is in the question, is very right to pick up on that issue of just how much is left by students at the end of the year, and just how much furniture perhaps is generated in the moves that universities do around their campuses. I can tell you that there's a tremendous amount of work that has been done at the university on this to avoid anything being sent off-site. And so if I just name a few of them that come to mind recently. So we now have a sort of process in place where we're identifying very early in the scope of works furniture that will be released, for example, from moves around our campuses. And we are then coordinating with a network of local schools via our student experiences team to invite them to take away this furniture and free of charge and use it on their premises. And this isn't just furniture, actually. It sort of tends to be items like pianos and various things that still have a considerable amount of life left in them that can be used within that local area. And that doesn't just extend to sort of furniture items either. So at the moment, the university is looking at how it disposes of its laptops and e-waste, and we are at the moment sending items to a supplier who redistributes them within the community to schools at a discounted price. And the university at the moment actually is looking at sort of moving that, so we get that in the locality of Surrey. I mean, that happens in Birmingham at the moment, but there are still very deprived areas of Surrey and Guildford in which those laptops could be distributed to schools without the university's sort of rebate. So we're looking at ways that we can do that at the moment and have an impact right here in Guildford, reducing any waste that's generated as a result. So those are sort of two ways that we're doing that. I think the other thing as well, Nick, is that it also depends on how we procure furniture in the first place. And so for refurbishments we're looking at the moment, we're actually looking at the specification of furniture, how much comes from recyclable, what can be done at the end of life to actually break it down and make sure that as much as possible can be reused or recycled. So that process actually has to happen before that furniture even gets on site.
Thanks, Tom. Chris, would you like to come in? And Ian as well. So Chris first, then Ian.
Yeah, I'll just sort of maybe make the case that I think what is good currently, I think, is that we are we have now on campus a student body who is probably the most environmentally aware body we've ever had on campus. So there's definitely an appetite amongst the students and hopefully the staff to try and act more pro-environmentally and more sustainably, and that's good to see. And I know that the University Student Union has made sustainability one of their key themes for the foreseeable future. So that's really encouraging as well. Just to sort of, I guess, lean on Tom's point there, I mean, looking at the psychology of it, I think there's more that we can do. I think there is an internal motivation amongst many people to act in a more sustainable way, but we do have to put in place the aspects of the external environment to allow people to act in such ways and to communicate to people that that is what is expected of them. So sort of creating the schemes that Tom is talking about are going to be important in terms of allowing people to perform the pro-environmental behaviours that we wish them to perform.
Thanks, Chris. Ian, you want to come in here?
Yes, I agree with everything that Tom and Chris have said there. There are some exciting developments about reuse and repair and recycling, which we should keep an eye on and maybe try to experiment with and do more research on at the university. One is the idea of repair cafes, which have been taking off in the UK and around Europe. And there will be EU regulations on sort of right to repair. It'd be very good to see that kind of thing taken up in the UK. We've also got, and this is taking off in parts of Surrey, like Godalming and Guildford, a community fridge movement. We've done some work on that, the idea of helping reduce food waste by having shareable fridges that people can put some surplus food in. And finally, we've been doing some exciting work with IKEA. Now, you might not associate IKEA with non-sustainable furniture use, but in fact, they're in the midst of changing their business model really profoundly in the direction of repair, reuse, and recycling. So we've done some exciting work with them, and we hope to do much more.
Thanks, Ian. Excellent. So I'd like to alert the panel to a question that's come in, which you might want to jot down some notes for before having a stab at it. But here's a question. The volume of tasks we could do is immense. What is the shortlist of, say, the top 5 things an individual can do? Or is that not a useful approach? So can I ask you perhaps all to reflect on that? And we'll pick up a more sort of, well, perhaps a single issue question or something like that in the meantime. We'll come back to this top 5 question. I think it's be rather fun to give you just put you on the spot for a few minutes just at the end. A question that's attracted my attention from as somebody who works in HR, I'm interested to know if there are employer-driven initiatives that companies can put in place to encourage their employees to do the right thing. We heard it the other way around, I think, a bit from you, Amy, saying, bring your own values to work and share them at work and encourage your employer to do so. Emma, I'm sure you've sort of done this as well in the places you've been. But are there things that employers can put in place that, if you like, go back the other way too? Do you have any examples? Amy? I
know Emma probably had some good insight on some specific schemes, perhaps, but what are the things that I've been banging on about quite a lot recently is that people should be really explicit in both their job marketing when they write those job ads and put them out in the community, to be talking about what the company's sustainable organization sustainability strategy is and how that job role will relate to that. So to demonstrate that person will have an impact on that target by tackling waste or energy or the social element or whatever it may be, to really make that clear in the job ad. Then when people come on board, to make sure there's training in the sustainability strategy, like make sure they actually are completely aware of what the strategy is and how it maps out within the business, and again alongside their job role, and then making sure that their job description has that all baked in. So if you're working in food service, you're working in hospitality, talking about like food waste, what does that mean? What does that mean for you in menu design? Actually you've got to be looking at using a smaller number of stock keeping units across your menu to make sure that nothing is like going off in spoilage, that you use everything up, that you're measuring your food waste, whatever it may be. And then lastly, to make sure that the people's KPIs are absolutely tied to those sustainability targets. So making sure that they know that they are being assessed on their performance and they are hopefully being rewarded and remunerated for their success on achieving those sustainability targets. So really, what doesn't happen enough, I don't think, at the moment, is that really strong link at every single part. It's in training and it's reinforced in training. So when you have your, your health and safety training that you have to regularly update, making sure that sustainability is baked into that, bake it into every single thing, every single away day, every single communication. It just shouldn't be this, all right, we've sat down, we've got our net zero strategy, we've just stuffed it over here. Make it in everything, in every weekly meeting, in every team meeting, talk about those targets. So as I said, Emma, I'm sure will have loads of more kind of specifics, but that's my thing, is bake it into every single thing.
Thank you. And Emma, would you like to chip in there?
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And actually the HR function are really key to helping us do this in terms of how we recruit, who we recruit, what we then do when we bring them in to get them exposure to what's going on, to train them. So that's absolutely key. And we really do rely on our HR colleagues to help us. One thing absolutely we're exploring at the moment is how do we build, as Amy was saying, baking this into people's personal development plans, which is their targets that they need to achieve as part of their job. It's what they're reviewed on at the end of the year. And it's also what they're bonused on. And that has a really important way of driving someone, whether they actually care about it or not, they suddenly become interested in it. So it starts to almost get sustainability in by default and by stealth, even if it's not a passionate area. I guess the other thing is competition, using different kind of consumer tools that are out there, get different departments competing, which department is wasting less, which department has the lowest carbon footprint, make it a bit more fun and engaging. What we don't want to do is make this a dry and boring topic. If you talk to anyone particularly in my business at the moment, everyone cares. If I ever say, is there any hands up for who wants to help? There's no shortage. It's just they don't know how to activate it. So we as companies need to give them the tools to help them do it, because there's no shortage of interest out there, whether because their grandchild has come and said, what are you doing about it? Or it's something they're reading about in the press. So absolutely, let's give them the tools.
And actually, I thought I should have mentioned this before, but so I have the pleasure of being able to work with Emma in a professional sense, because through my work at Footprint, I do lots of thought leadership reports. And so the thought leadership report we've just brought out, which I don't know if you can see, is called Empowering Sustainability Heroes. So this was all about going through every job role within a hospitality and food service environment, saying, how does sustainability relate to you if you work in marketing, HR, health and safety, menu design, like everybody? Because, I think drawing those links, and I did another one on food waste as well, like Food Needs You. But I think that thing of, making those links really tangible. But I mean, also it's great to have, an organization like Nestle who are supporting, documents like this to help people in an industry actually see, well, what does sustainability mean to me? I work in finance. Why does it matter? And then it's that whole, those questions about company pensions. Where are they? Are they in green providers? Like every single element of every single decision you make in the workplace can have a really impactful, really big impact. So it's really important to make sure that we're harnessing it everywhere we can. Thanks for sharing that report, Amy and Emma. And to the audience here, you heard it here first. It's why you should always attend the What It Takes session. Tom, did you want, Chris, I couldn't tell if you had a...
Yeah, I have my hand up.
Can we go to, let's go to you, Chris, then on this topic.
I mean, I can't agree more with what the others have said. I think that creating, making it normative that pro-environmental behaviour is expected is important. So I've been in situations where it isn't normative, and someone tries to impose an environmental initiative on a cohort of people, and it becomes seen as the preserve of a particular individual to take responsibility for, or it's reacted against in some way which isn't particularly helpful. So trying to make it appear as though it is actually normative, so it's expected of you and you see other people doing it, is going to be helpful for pulling along other people. I just wanted to give an example of where we've trialed such things. So I was working with a PhD student when I was at Sheffield, and we had a dietary-based intervention in a business that was in Sheffield. So we went in and we ran a sort of a low-carbon diet week. So we went into the canteen and we came up with, worked with the chef to come up with a load of different low-carbon meal options, removing most of the meat from the menu. And the idea here was to look at whether or not we could get contextual spillover effects. So whether or not people's changing dietary choice and options within the workplace would then transfer to home. So a bit like what Amy was saying about bringing your good values and stuff to the workplace, we were looking at in the opposite direction. We found that the intervention week was generally well responded to. So people tended to see what it was all about and would tend to understand the need to change their dietary practices. And in some cases, we did see changes in people's identity. So people became sort of more pro-environmental as a result of participating in that week. And that's kind of what you want if you want to see a continuation of the good practices beyond the immediacy of the context that you're investigating. But we also saw some reactive responses to that. So we had people actually going outside, going to the shop, buying ham and bringing it back to the canteen. Because they were responding negatively to the attempt to sort of change the availability of options within that space. So it's just to be aware of the fact that, you know, when you do wish to make changes, you can get very positive and constructive responses, but you can also get some negative responses. So it's how you manage those as well, which is going to be important in terms of actually getting everyone on the same hymn sheet. In terms of competition, just to pick up on that point, competition can be a really effective way of motivating people to act, because people do like a bit of competition, and gamification of sustainable behaviour is something that we've trialled and can work successfully. Just to point out, though, again, the gamification can backfire if a group realises quite quickly that they're not going to win. So they may then sort of start to not try so hard or not be as motivated. So again, it's managing that gaming environment in order to ensure that everyone stays motivated and does the right thing.
We really do sometimes live in a world of perverse outcomes, don't we?
The book, Ian said this fantastic thing to me about you've got to sell the fab to the man. So it was the features, advantages and benefits to the money, authority, and I can't remember what the N stands for, but just how that whole kind of building on what Chris was saying about the, making sure that people buy in and you're not imposing it on them. So anyway,
Thank you. It's always a pleasure for people like us to hear when things have stuck that we actually said, maybe some years back. So that's delightful. I gave you the challenge from one of our speakers. We've got only about 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to be really fast. I may not get through everybody, so please forgive me if I haven't mentioned you. I do want to do a very, very brief wrap up and thanks at the end. So we've got about 2 minutes left. Tom, could I ask you for your top 5? Quick fire, please.
Oh, these are going to be, there's going to be repetition here, okay? But I mean, eating plant-based, switching to renewable energy at home if you can, certified tariff, please, not just green tariffs, reducing the amount of flights that you do, reducing driving, those are the sort of things that I've mentioned. But I've got to say, it's not just personal responsibility. Councils, local authorities, government has to make this easy for people. It's not just personal responsibility.
Fantastic. Ian, can I go to you next? You can...
Yes, of course. I completely agree with what Tom said there. And if you want a 6-point plan, you can go to the website The Jump, which is in my slides, launched by Zero Guildford recently. So they've got a 6-point plan, and it does cover food, clothes, travel, and so on. But one of the key points in there is about using your voice. And there's a great Canadian climate scientist and campaigner called Catherine Hayhoe, who says the key thing we should all do is talk about it. Because for an existential crisis, this is something which doesn't get talked about nearly enough. So there isn't an annual presentation to Parliament by the Prime Minister. He doesn't address the nation on climate, and we need more of that. And we need to be writing to our MPs very, very often to say this matters.
Thanks, Ian. Forgive me, panel. I'm going to have to stop there. I'm sure you've diligently written down your top 5. It remains to me to thank all of you very much for your contributions and for your 3 minutes and for your openness in the question and answer. So on behalf of all of the audience, I'd just like to say thank you very much to you. I would also like to thank very much all the people who joined as participants and came on this webinar. It will be, for those who have attended, please note there will be a link to a short post-event survey, which will be put in the chat box, and we would be very grateful if you can complete it, please. Finally, just to note, there were many more questions and really interesting ones that we couldn't cover here. Hydrogen, geothermal energy, electric cars, you name it, it was all there. So fantastic audience and a fantastic panel. Thank you, and thank you to Advancement and to the alumni group for setting this up and running it for us.
Thank you all very much.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
thank you.